We gather here today, on this crisp November morning, with the grand familiar dome of the United States Capitol standing silent witness behind us. It is a structure built to represent order debate, the pursuit of a more perfect union. Yet it has also overseen declarations of war and the deployment of armies across the globe. It is in this place of profound tension between power and peace that we must begin our talk. I hold in my hand this ancient book, the Bible, a library of texts that speaks with a surprisingly relevant voice into our modern struggles. Let us start not with a shout, but with a quiet, revolutionary promise from the very lips of Jesus. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. These words, from Matthew 5:9. These words are not a gentle suggestion. They are a proclamation about the very nature of God's family and the shape of His coming kingdom. This single verse immediately throws us into the heart of a deep and often troubling paradox. How can a book that so clearly elevates the peacemaker to the status of God's own child also contain passages that seem to command, or at the very least, describe warfare in graphic detail? This is not a contradiction to be smoothed over or ignored, but a tension we must inhabit and explore. The Bible does not offer us a simple, one-size-fits-all answer to the complex questions of violence and conflict. Instead, it presents a sprawling, multi-generational story of God's interaction with a broken, beautiful, and often violent world, a world much like our own. It's a story that confronts wickedness head-on, while simultaneously pointing toward a future where peace reigns supreme. As I move among you now, I see in your faces the same questions that have troubled believers for centuries. We are surrounded by news of conflict, by political rhetoric that divides, and by the ever-present threat of violence. It is all too easy to feel that peace is a distant, utopian dream. Yet, the Bible insists that it is the very vocation of those who follow God. The call to be a peacemaker is not a call to passive inactivity. It is a summons to a difficult, creative, and courageous task. It means stepping into places of strife. When we open the first part of our Bibles, the Old Testament, we cannot avoid the stark reality of war. The stories are visceral and unsettling. We read of Joshua leading the Israelites into Canaan, and of battles commanded by God to purge idolatry and wickedness. We follow King David, a man described as being after God's own heart, who was also a brilliant and ruthless military commander, his hands stained with the blood of many wars. These are not comfortable passages. They depict a world where national survival was precarious, and where divine justice was sometimes executed through the sword. The people of Israel, chosen by God to be a beacon to the nations, often found themselves fighting for their very existence against overwhelming odds. These accounts can be deeply troubling to our modern sensibilities, and rightly so. They show a God who is not a detached philosophical deity, but one passionately involved in the messy, often brutal, history of His people. The Old Testament portrays a God of absolute justice, one who hates evil, oppression, and societal rot that destroys human flourishing. In this ancient context, war was presented as the terrible, necessary surgery required to remove a cancer that threatened to consume everything. It was seen as a tool of judgment against nations that had fallen into practices of child sacrifice, systemic injustice, grotesque violence. This perspective shows a God who takes evil seriously, so seriously that He would act decisively within history to confront it. However, it is a profound mistake to read these passages as a universal, timeless endorsement of warfare. Even within the Old Testament, a counter-narrative of peace is constantly growing. Alongside battles, we hear the powerful voices of the prophets. Isaiah, Amos, Micah cry out for a different kind of world. They condemn kings who trust in chariots and armies rather than in God. They speak of a future where true security is not military matter, but justice for the poor and righteousness in the land. These prophetic visions correct and remind us that God's ultimate desire is shalom, comprehensive peace. This prophetic hope reaches its zenith in a beautiful image. Isaiah looks forward to a day when God will arbitrate between the nations, and the result? They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Isaiah 2:4. This is not just a cessation of hostilities, it is a fundamental reordering of society. The tools of death are to be reforged into instruments of life and cultivation. This is the future God steers history toward, where present violence yields to final, lasting peace. With the arrival of Jesus of Nazareth, the biblical narrative takes a dramatic and decisive turn. Peace, reconciliation. Jesus is introduced as the Prince of Peace, the one who embodies God's shalom. His teachings radicalize the call to peace. When he delivered the Sermon on the Mount, he didn't just say, "Don't murder." He went to the root of violence and said, "Do not be angry with your brother." He famously instructed his followers, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you." Matthew 5:43-44. This is a command that shatters our natural human instincts for retaliation and self-preservation. This radical teaching has led many Christians throughout history to adopt pacifism, the complete refusal to participate in any form of violence or warfare. Early Christians were often known for their refusal to serve in the Roman army, believing their allegiance was to a different kingdom and a different king, one whose victory was won not through violence, but through self-sacrificial love on a cross. For the pacifist, the command to turn the other cheek is not a metaphor. It is a literal instruction for how to break the cycle of violence. They argue that violence only ever begets more violence, and that the only way to truly overcome evil is with good, as the Apostle Paul would later write. Peace, in this view, must be achieved through exclusively peaceful means. Yet, as Christianity grew and became intertwined with the state, another perspective emerged, now known as the just war doctrine. Augustine, Aquinas. They wrestled with the reality of a fallen world, where evil tyrants and aggressive nations inflict horrific suffering on the innocent. They asked, is it always the most loving act to stand by and allow the weak to be slaughtered? The just war tradition attempts to provide a moral framework for determining when, if ever, war might be a tragic necessity. It sets forth strict criteria. War must be a last resort, declared by a legitimate authority, for a just cause, like stopping a genocide, and fought with means that are proportional to the ends, intentionally avoiding harm to non-combatants. The Bible's deep and nuanced conversation about war and peace does not happen in a vacuum. It resonates with the wisdom of thoughtful men and women from every corner of our world and every era of history. As I walk among you and we feel the slight chill in the air, let's listen for these echoes. Consider the words of Mahatma Gandhi, a Hindu leader from India who deeply admired Jesus' teachings. He famously said, "An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind." This powerfully captures the essence of Jesus' call to break the cycle of retaliation. It's a practical observation. Violence, when met with violence, doesn't lead to victory, but to mutual destruction. It's a truth that we see played out in endless conflicts around our globe today. Let's travel in our minds to another continent, to Africa, and listen to the wisdom of a village elder. There is a common proverb found in many cultures there that says, "Peace is cooked in the same pot as porridge." This simple, earthy image tells a profound truth. Peace is not something that is declared from on high by powerful leaders and then magically appears. It is built slowly, day by day, in the ordinary acts of community life. In sharing food, in resolving small disputes, in teaching children, in mending relationships. It is a grassroots effort, a slow-cooking meal that requires patience and constant attention. This aligns perfectly with the Christian call to be peacemakers in our families, our neighborhoods, and our workplaces. Now let us turn to Asia, to the words of a poet who wrote, "The hand that has never learned to lay down its weapon has forgotten how to hold another's." This speaks to the hardening of the heart that conflict creates. A posture of constant defense, of perpetual suspicion, makes true human connection impossible. To build bridges, we must first be willing to lower our fists. This is the vulnerability that Jesus modeled. He did not meet the violence of the empire with a sword, but with open hands that were ultimately nailed to a cross. That posture of openness, of vulnerability for the sake of the other, is the beginning of all true reconciliation and community. These voices from different lands do not contradict the biblical message. They amplify it. They show that the desire for peace and the understanding of its costs are universal human experiences. God has written this longing upon every human heart. Psalm 34:18 tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. This is God's perspective. He is not a distant observer of human conflict. He mourns with every victim. He grieves over every act of violence, and he is intimately present with those who suffer. This is the very heart of Christian teaching. We are called to embody that same compassionate presence in a world desperate for healing. So, as the sun begins to dip lower behind the Capitol, casting long shadows across this lawn, what are we to do? It is not enough to simply understand the biblical tension between war and peace. It is not enough to nod in agreement with the wisdom of the ages. The call of Jesus, the call of the prophets, the very cry of the Spirit is a call to action. We who seek to be called children of God must be peacemakers, not just peace lovers. This is a practical, daily vocation. It begins, as all things in the Christian life must, with prayer. We must relentlessly pray for wisdom for our leaders, for comfort for the victims of war, and for a change of heart for the perpetrators of violence. Second, our peacemaking must be profoundly practical. It means caring for the victims of conflict. As a church, as communities, as individuals, we are called to feed the hungry, to give water to the thirsty, to shelter the refugee. When war displaces families and destroys livelihoods, the work of peace is to provide a safe harbor. It is to bandage the wounds, visible and invisible, and to offer a place of welcome and healing. This is the work of mercy, the tangible expression of God's love in a broken world. This is how we push back against the darkness of war, not with bombs, but with bread and blankets. Third, being a peacemaker means we must speak for justice. We must use our voices to courageously call out lies, propaganda, and dehumanizing rhetoric. We must insist that our leaders pursue every possible diplomatic and nonviolent solution to conflict. Here, in the shadow of this great building of power, we must remember that our primary citizenship is in heaven, and our ultimate allegiance is to the Prince of Peace. We must hold our own nations accountable to the standards of justice and righteousness, advocating for policies that build bridges, not walls, and that promote human flourishing for all, not just for a select few. Finally, let us leave this place with a renewed hope and a firm resolve. The task is great, but we do not undertake it alone. We end where the prophets urged us to look, to a future secured by God Himself. I leave you with that same glorious promise from Isaiah. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Let this vision be our guiding star. Let this be the work to which we give our hands, our hearts, and our lives. Pray for peace. Act for justice. Love your neighbor, and yes, love your enemy. For in doing so, we live out our true identity as the blessed children of God. Amen.